stay tuned because I'm going to reveal the #1 source, reason, and solution for most of the problems and issues with the MBTI tests. Yo, this is the new me now. Pretty cool, right? Nah, I'm just joking with you. So if you are wondering, yes, I did get my makeup done at a spa on Neptune. I got a free coupon because I got one on Uranus the other weekend. They're not really used to folks who have 2 eyes over there, so they kind of had a field day and really wanted to make mine different colors, so that happened. Aliens aren't actually usually the best at holding makeup brushes because they don't have fingers, they just have squelches. Not to be racist, just a fact. Howdy cloudies, it's quinintheclouds and welcome to another episode of FedUpSpedUp, the series where I rant about something and either talk about it super fast or speed it up in editing so that you don't have to listen to me ramble for hours on end. Woohoo! Today's topic, the YouTube MBTI trend. So recently there's been this little new trend of YouTubers, particularly gamers, taking the MBTI test, the 16 personalities test, on a video to find out their type. First of all, I do think it's awesome that more and more people are becoming aware of MBTI, Myers-Briggs, and Jungian psychology, but this is not the way to do it. And because of these claims that the test is BS or fake or just like astrology, more and more people in the YouTube community and the real world are seeing it as something like that, rather than as actual backed up psychological studies. Okay, there are a lot of issues with the test, but we will get to that later. But Quinlan, I really like the MBTI test. What's wrong with it? Good question. A lot of things. MBTI in of itself is amazing and awesome. Myers-Briggs and Jung psychology is founded and backed up with scientific research and things, and it is just a theory.
A game theory.
But as far as theories go, there's been nothing to disprove or cause discretion among that line of thinking. In fact, the biggest issue with the inaccuracies is the tests, not the actual psychology itself. Now, the most popular one that is going around is the 16 personalities test. You may have recently seen Jacksepticeye or Markiplier take this test in a video. Jack was typed as an ENFJ. Hooray, congrats, that was actually accurate. Good job, test, for getting it right that time. Woohoo! Mark, on the other hand, was typed as an ENTP. And I literally, kid you not, I did a spit take when that result was revealed. Because he is so not an ENTP. I will go to my grave swearing that Markiplier is not an NE Dom. NE Dom? What does that mean? Huh? Good question. Stay tuned and I will explain what I mean by that, as well as revealing the #1 issue with people typing and mistyping, and the biggest issue among the community as a whole. First of all, hold up. If you don't know what MBTI is, let me give you a quick little rundown. Okay. The Myers-Briggs Typology Indicator, aka MBTI, is a system by which to classify people into 16 distinct personality types. These types are not, as many people might see, boxes that limit people to specific sets of traits. Instead, they are umbrella terms that help to get an overall idea of that personality, that person, the way that their mind works, and the way that their personality works and interacts with the world, to get a better sense of who you are as a person and who other people are as a person, as people. So the names of each of the types are written as a set of 4 letters, each one standing for a different part of your personality. The first letter determines where you get your energy from. If you are an E, or extrovert, you get your energy from the world around you, from other people, and from expanding ideas. If you are an I, or introvert, it means you get your energy from alone time, solitude, and narrowing down of ideas. So whereas E's like to tend to explore options, I's might tend to narrow down options to find an ideal one. The second letter represents how you take in information from the world around you and from the world within you. If you are an S or sensor, then you take in information via the 5 senses and from solid, factual things that are true and real, concrete ideas. If you are an N, or intuitive, then you take in information from the abstract, the imaginary, things that might not necessarily be as real or practical, but are more what you would attribute to the dreamers type of people. The next letter is a little confusing, because people tend to think that it represents something it doesn't. What it does represent is how you make decisions. If you're an F, or a feeler, you tend to make decisions either based on what you feel is morally right or wrong, or based on how you feel it's going to affect other people and what you think is best for others, or what you think is best for yourself morally and integrity-wise. If you're a T, or a thinker, then you tend to make decisions based on efficiency's sake or on pursuit of knowledge. The reason that people get confused is because they assume all thinkers are inherently smart. They're not. And all feelers are inherently over-emotional. They're not. There are feelers who are smarter than thinkers. There are thinkers who are more clearly emotional than feelers. Everyone thinks, everyone feels. It's just a matter of what is more important to you in a decision-making process or in how you determine what to do. And the last letter represents how you organize the information that you have. If you are a J or a judger, that doesn't mean that you're a judgmental person, don't worry. It just means that you like to have more balance and structure to your life. You might tend to be a little bit more organized. You might consider yourself a control freak, or maybe a perfectionist, or maybe you just really, really want things to be in a predictable way, even if you tend to be a big procrastinator, who knows. And if you are a P, or a perceiving type, then you might have a little bit more of a laid-back, spontaneous approach to the information that you have, and you might tend to be a little bit less organized, but a little bit more go with the flow, so to speak. So if you take each of those letters and mix match them every which way, you will have the 16 different personality types. Woohoo! Okay, now that that bit's out of the way, let's get into the actual issues with the tests. You can't expect a test with either or options to be able to accurately pinpoint a human being and define their personality accurately. These tests mistype people way more often than they should, so they should not be taken seriously. If you look at what Markiplier did in his video, first of all, he stubbornly decided at the beginning that he was only going to answer at the extremes, so he was only going to give the strongly agree and strongly disagree, which already is not going to give you an accurate answer, so what? Plus he accidentally answered the opposite that he meant to click several times. But even aside from all of that, the questions that are asked aren't really based on types or personality. One of the questions was, do you feel anxious in very stressful situations? That's not specific to any type. Anyone can feel anxious. There is a line of confusion between personality type and any sort of mental illnesses or disorders. The tests don't take those into consideration. So when Markiplier, who has ADHD, saw questions that related to things that ADHD people might have as symptoms, he clicked those because he has ADHD, not because he has that type. There's a difference. A lot of people will mix up ADHD with the function NE. What's a function? We'll get to that. Hang on. Another issue, and this is just an ongoing issue in the community as a whole, is intuitive bias, which is the tendency for people to think that people who are intuitive, or N types, are somehow smarter or better than people who have S types or sensors. That's not true. Sure, there are a lot of people who you can look at, like Albert Einstein or Walt Disney or William Shakespeare, and be like, oh, they're all intuitors. Of course they are, because they're some of the greatest minds of our time. And so it's easy to say that intelligent careers are for N types, but that's not necessarily true. The majority of scientists are actually sensors because they're better at dealing with concrete data and hands-on experiments. And so this ongoing issue has seeped into the tests, and the tests sometimes have questions that are phrased in such a way that makes it seem very clearly like one of the options is the better option. Like, do you consider yourself a person who has dreams? Who's gonna say they don't have, what? I mean, maybe there are people who are gonna say, no, I don't have any dreams or ambitions or goals in life, but if you click that you agree that you have dreams, it's going to give you more of a chance of having an N as a result, which, first of all, anyone can have dreams or ambitions. Second of all, it's misleading people to want to have a certain type. And the thing is, people with the N type make up less than a quarter of the population. Nearly 80% of people have the S type, and yet when they take the tests online, a lot of the time they might get the N in their type because the questions are worded in a way that makes you want that as an answer. But by far, the biggest issue with the tests, with people trying to type themselves who don't know what they're talking about, with all of that jazz, is the fact that those tests only consider the types by the 4 letters, and not by the actual key, most important thing of all when determining type. Ready? Cognitive functions! Woo! Now what the diddly darn heck are cognitive functions, Quinlan? Huh, glad you asked, Quinlan. Huh. The cognitive functions are the things behind the letters that actually determine types, personalities, and how your mind works. The letters are just there as a name to represent, to show you what your functions are, not as an entirety of the thing. The tests only type with the letters. They don't take into consideration the functions whatsoever, and therefore people get mistyped a lot. Hence why Markiplier was typed as an ENTP. And I know that you probably don't know what that means, but if you know MatPat, the theorist, the game theory, that guy, he is an ENTP. Would you say that Matthew Patrick and Markiplier are the same personality type? If you said yes, I don't know what to do with you. But anyway, let's break it down. Wiki, 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 icky, icky, poof, poof. Just kidding, the only thing that I can break down are hopes and dreams. Alrighty, so quick rundown of the cognitive functions. Here we go! Okay, so the cognitive functions are based on the middle 2 letters. Remember, the middle 2 letters could be N or S and F or T. Every person has a function for thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting, because everyone does all 4 things. There aren't people who don't think at all, but they feel, right? It's just blah, 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 doesn't happen. So those are the 4 categories of functions. Now each of those can be extroverted or introverted. And when you do that, then you have 8 total types, and those are the functions. Yay! I could explain what each of the functions are and what each of them do, but that would take a long time, and so if you want me to make a video about that sometime in the future, I know this isn't my usual content, but I've studied a lot about this, and it's really interesting and passionate to me. That wasn't correct usage of words. But yeah, I'd be happy to explain it more sometime. But for now, just remember that everyone has all 8 of the functions, but only the top 4 we really care about mostly. So let's say that you are an ISTJ. That would mean that your middle 2 letters are S and T. And there's a whole like math thing to figuring out the functions, but until you can figure that out and just like get it to the point where you can like know it in your own mind, just like Google it. It's easy. There are tons of charts all over Google that will tell you what each type's functions are. But yeah, so if you are an ST type, then your first 2 functions will be a sensing and a thinking function, and then your second 2 will be a feeling and an intuiting function, and those can be in whatever order. And that order of the functions that you have determines your type. Whoa! Whoa! So don't try to figure out your type based on the letters, try to figure it out based on the functions, and through that you can find out what your type is letter-wise. Oh, also, of the 4 functions that you have, 1 will be introverted, then extroverted, then introverted, then extroverted. And if you're an extrovert, it'll be extroverted, introverted, extroverted, introverted. Your first function, if you're an extrovert, is going to be an extroverted function, and vice versa for introverts. Woohoo! So for example, if you have a type, let's say INFJ. So since we have the J and the person's type is an introvert, that means that the first function is going to be taken from the second slot. Okay, sorry, you know what, this is more complex than we need to get into right now. I'm getting ahead of myself, sorry. Is it too late now to say sorry? Cause I'm just different. But anyway, so an INFJ, I'll just say the functions. The functions of an INFJ would be NI, introverted intuiting, FE, extroverted feeling, then TI and SE, which are introverted thinking and extroverted sensing. So if you can find out what your main 2 functions are, that will narrow it down to 2 types. And those will be the same type except one's an introvert, one's an extrovert, which just means the order of the functions is different. So let's say that you studied all the functions and you figured out that the ones that you definitely think you lead with are NE, extroverted intuition, and TI. Once you know that, you have narrowed it down so that there's only 2 possible types that you could be. Yay! With those 2, you could either be an ENTP or an INTP. So the main way that you would figure that out is either A, you know whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert, or B, you look at the order of the functions, so just figure out which one is your dominant function. If you can't figure out your top 2 functions, but you can figure out which one function you definitely think is your dominant function, that also narrows it down to 2. Let's just say that you figured out that your dominant function is NE, just because we've been using that one. The only 2 types that you could have would be ENTP or ENFP. So if you figure that out, and then you also think you might have TI, then you can look at the overlap and see, boom, ENTP fits right in there. Whoa! Side note, ENTPs and ENFPs are the most introverted of all the extroverts. Most ENTPs and ENFPs will think that they are introverts. Some of those types are definitely extroverts and it's clear, but as a whole, those types tend to be on the more introverted side, but slightly leaning extroverty. And that's another reason that the tests mistype a lot. They don't take that into consideration at all. So why is it so important that we find out our type based on functions instead of letters? Well, letters can be pretty deceiving. So you might think the types ISTP and INFP are really, really similar because they both have an I and a P. So it's 2 letters in common, that's half. So you might think they've got at least like half in common, right? Wrong! If you look at their functions, you'll see that they actually have the exact opposite functions in the exact opposite order. Therefore, those 2 types are the complete polar opposites of each other as far as types go. So your opposite isn't the opposite just based on the letters. If you're an INFP, your opposite isn't necessarily ESTJ. Your opposite would be ISTP because functions. The letters are mainly just placeholders to show umbrellas of who you are. The functions are actually how your personality works and how your brain works with that personality. So how do you find your type? If the tests online are not to be trusted and will lead you astray, I'll tell you how. First step is to read up on the different functions and see which ones you identify with the most. If you don't understand them clearly, that's okay. You can always learn more and ask questions. There's a lot of information about it, but it's really worthwhile because me personally, I've learned so much about myself and so much. It's just like, oh my gosh, that's why I do that. This is how I can use those things to do this, and this is et cetera, et cetera. And then when I find out other people's types, I'm like, oh, that's how their mind works. I can try to relate to them more now. It's awesome. A great way to start if you don't know anything about the functions and you kind of just want to go in there blind. I highly recommend taking a functions test. I will link a couple of them down in the description, and know that again, these are online tests, so again, they're not going to be completely accurate to your personality maybe, but it's going to be much more accurate than the 16 personalities type of tests and the ones that just type you based on letters. What these ones will do is they will test you based on the functions that you use and identify with most, and then we'll show you the percentages of each function. That way you can see which ones are your highest or how close certain ones are. A good way to narrow it down is to see which of each pair you identify with, because there's S versus N and then there's F versus T. So if you in your mind know that you're more of a thinker than a feeler, go for that and look at the thinking functions more, and vice versa for feelers, and same with sensors or intuitors. So if you strongly feel that, say, you're a feeler rather than a thinker, then look at FI, introverted feeling, versus FE, extroverted feeling, and see which of those aligns with you more. If you identify much more with FE and you're sure that you're a feeler, that instantly makes you an FJ type. So you've already figured out 2 of your letters right there. Woo! And then just use all of the different information, all the different things you have to cross overlap and see which type actually has those functions and in which order best suits you. And another important step is to just be patient. This can be hard, it can be a long process, or maybe you find it out really quickly and easily. Keep at it, and I know you can do it, and it will be amazing when you figure it out, because the more that you learn about your type, the more you'll see yourself in that description. And that'll just help you to understand yourself better and to understand other people better, and that just helps us all a little bit more on the road to compassion and understanding. But yeah, bottom line is, the tests online are bad. Take a functions test instead, use the functions to determine your type, and know that the people who do it on YouTube as a trend are kind of giving it a really bad name. So just do your research before you bash something that's been 100 years of psychological research. Literally. Any hoozles, I really hope you enjoyed this long, rambling FedUpSpedUp, but it's something I'm really passionate about, so let me know if you want to ever see more. Subscribe if you want to join the madness, and as always, have a beautiful day full of magic and joy. Bye!
But I've got a feeling I'm falling for nobody else but you. You caught my eye, and I've got a feeling I'm falling. Show me the ring and I'll jump right through.